Hi, and welcome to the WellnessFX training module where we specifically look at certain hormones, specifically DHEA, total testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol or E2, and sex hormone binding globulin. Now, if you haven't yet watched the general overview video where we talked about certain hormones and steroid hormone physiology, I encourage you to do so because some of what we talk about here will make a little bit more sense. So let's start with DHEA. Now, DHEA is primarily produced from the inner layer of the adrenal cortex. It's also been found to be produced in small amounts from the liver, in the male testes, small amounts in the brain, and even the small intestines. But to be sure, serum or blood levels of DHEA are likely derived from the adrenal cortex. Now, DHEA has a number of different roles in the body. Historically, it was pretty much seen as a precursor for other hormones, that DHEA could be converted to a variety of other hormones downstream in the steroid hormone pathway. But more recently, DHEA has been found to have a number of other different roles in the body. For example, DHEA is considered now to be a neurosteroid, meaning that it has specific effects on the brain. It acts on certain receptors, such as GABA receptors. And therefore, we don't really know all the effects of DHEA now, but it's definitely having a much stronger look at it in research in terms of its effects by itself, and not merely as a precursor. DHEA has been found to be somewhat anti-inflammatory and can stimulate certain components of the immune system. In fact, certain autoimmune conditions have found to be not only deficient in DHEA, but supplemental DHEA in certain autoimmune individuals has actually shown some promising results in terms of not only their symptoms, but what else is going on in terms of their physiology as well. Now, DHEA is said to be a hormone that decreases in production as we age. So depending on the age of the individual that's being tested, the higher the age, potentially the lower the DHEA level. DHEA has been found to be increased in low-calorie diets as well as with exercise. So if somebody has high DHEA, it may be that they're actively exercising, maybe following a low-calorie diet, as well as DHEA can also be produced in sort of, let's say, acute stress situations where the body is having that initial stress response and therefore producing more than considered to be normal DHEA. DHEA has also been found to be antagonistic to cortisol, meaning that DHEA can actually block some of the effects of cortisol, which is why during stressful events and cortisol is being produced in abundance, that DHEA may also be produced in abundance so that cortisol doesn't have so many deleterious or negative or damaging effects on the body. Potential causes for low DHEA not only is due to aging, like we just talked about, but there's some evidence that certain inflammatory chronic inflammatory markers can actually suppress DHEA production. So if you see low DHEA, the general thought is that maybe somebody has been under some kind of chronic stress or chronic inflammatory response, similar that might be seen, for example, in autoimmune patients, but not exclusively in autoimmune. That individuals that have a long-standing chronic inflammatory or stress in the body may actually have lower levels of DHEA, and it's probably one of the more common reasons today. Again, reasons for high DHEA may be acute exercise, acute stress, or possibly even a low-calorie diet. Now let's talk about some of the other hormones. Some of the sex hormones that we're going to talk about are testosterone, total as well as free, as well as estradiol. And what we're going to do basically is talk about the male testes as well as the female ovaries, depending on who this test is being run on. Now, the testes synthesize and produce mostly testosterone. Testosterone produced from the testes then goes into circulation and can either act as testosterone or be converted to some downstream hormones, specifically estradiol, which is tested in WellnessFX, as well as dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. The hormone or the enzyme that converts testosterone into estradiol is called aromatase. And aromatase is found in peripheral tissues of the testes, and therefore once the testes make testosterone, can convert estradiol depending on the amount of aromatase that's present. Now, two of the markers that are evaluated are total testosterone as well as free testosterone. Now, as the name total testosterone would suggest, that's all the testosterone that's found circulating in the blood. What that means is that there's a plasma protein made in the liver called sex hormone binding globulin. sex hormone binding globulin, as a protein, binds onto these otherwise fat-soluble hormones and could not be well transported in the otherwise aqueous solution or watery solution or plasma of the blood. Because fat and water or oil and water don't really mix very well, this sex hormone binding globulin protein binds on to the steroid hormones for transportation. Now, a bound steroid hormone is an unusable steroid hormone, meaning the testosterone that's produced from the male testes, if it's mostly bound up to sex hormone binding globulin, then what you may have is a normal level of testosterone if testosterone is being produced normally, but low levels of free testosterone. So when looking on a blood chemistry, if you have total testosterone and free testosterone both as markers, if total testosterone is normal but free testosterone is low, chances are then what you're looking at is the majority of the testosterone is bound specifically to sex hormone binding globulin, and that's why free testosterone is low. This is not a situation of necessarily poor testosterone production. If total testosterone is normal but free is low, then really the goal would be to try to reduce the amount of sex hormone binding globulin, therefore increasing the amount of free testosterone and ideally lowering the low testosterone symptoms that that individual is probably experiencing. Also, when it comes to testosterone, let's say, for example, that a male has perhaps normal or even low testosterone. The question is why? Low testosterone could be, using this model, an overconversion really to either hormones, but specifically estradiol. So in a man, if on a panel you see normal or low testosterone, but high estradiol, then chances are he may be making enough testosterone, but that testosterone is being overconverted to estradiol, thus showing up as low or low normal levels of testosterone and high levels of estradiol. Potential causes of that is an increase in the enzyme aromatase. Now, aromatase is found in large amounts in adipose tissue or fat tissue. So if a male is overweight, then chances are one of the best courses of action for him is to try to lose some of that weight, decrease the size of the fat cells, decrease the amount of aromatase found in the fat cells, and therefore decrease the conversion of testosterone to estradiol. And simply doing that, because production may have been okay, may end up leading to better levels of testosterone, lower levels of estradiol, and that had really nothing to do with production in the first place. Other potential causes of low testosterone, as we talked about in that previous video, is let's say the pituitary gland, which normally produces luteinizing hormone to stimulate the testes to make testosterone, let's say luteinizing hormone was low. If luteinizing hormone is low, then testosterone will likely also be low because it's just simply not being stimulated to actually produce testosterone. Another potential cause, and this unfortunately is something that is seen more and more today and is backed up by studies and medical research, is the testes, understandably, are very, very sensitive to oxidative stress. Now, in the male, the testes, when you think about it, are really producing sperm as well. And this has to do with some fairly sensitive machinery and different processes that are going on in order to make what is essentially passing on the DNA of that particular male. And because that's such an intricate process, that the testes are very sensitive to oxidative stress today, inflammation as well. And there's a number of studies suggesting that certain inflammatory markers, certain amounts of oxidative stress can actually decrease the production of testosterone in the testes. And this individual, while those processes can't really adequately be tested, by improving things like gastrointestinal function, decreasing inflammation, just by doing those things, you may actually help increase production of testosterone by decreasing inflammation and decreasing oxidative stress. Also, there's another nutrient that's very important in producing testosterone, and that is zinc. Zinc deficiency can very much cause a decrease in production of testosterone despite having normal levels of luteinizing hormone as well as limited amounts of oxidative stress and inflammation. That simple zinc deficiency can decrease the production of testosterone. Talking about other elements on a blood chemistry, zinc deficiency can maybe be picked up by the alkaline phosphatase enzyme. If alkaline phosphatase as a zinc-dependent enzyme is a little bit low, then what you may be looking at is zinc deficiency, and it may stand to be a good clinical trial for at least a couple of months, supplementing with zinc to see not only if it improves alkaline phosphatase, but as well as testosterone production. Now, in the female ovary, if you remember back to the video that we talked about the female reproductive hormone cycle and how those hormones are produced, the ovary, or the follicle more accurately, actually produces testosterone. Now, under the right circumstances, still within the ovary, it produces estradiol as well. And then ideally, the ovaries produce estradiol. Now, estradiol, once circulating in the system, also binds on to sex hormone binding globulin. Now, let's say, for example, these markers were run on a woman. It's possible that if the enzymes are not present in the ovary to actually convert testosterone to estradiol, that the ovary may produce testosterone instead. So in a woman who has high testosterone and low estradiol on a blood chemistry, what you may be looking at is some sort of defect within the ovary so that it's overproducing testosterone. Now, commonly this is referred to as polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, and if this is the case and high levels of testosterone are found on a woman, that they may need to be referred to their doctor for further evaluation to see if maybe they do have something like PCOS. Now, I will say that the number one cause of infertility today is PCOS. And the number one cause of PCOS in women today is blood sugar dysregulation. So if you see elevated testosterone on a female, then one thing you might want to look at is other markers looking at blood sugar regulation. For example, fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, triglyceride and cholesterol ratio, anything that will look at their ability to handle blood sugar. And if there seems to be some issue in their handling of blood sugar, that may be why they have high testosterone. And simply correcting some of the blood sugar imbalances may in fact help to improve their testosterone levels to a lower level and also therefore increase the estradiol levels. Now let's briefly talk about sex hormone binding globulin. So this is a protein that's made in the liver. The higher the sex hormone binding globulin levels, the more it will bind up and bind on to the steroid hormones, making less free hormone available. Again, production in the given glands may be perfect and just fine, but if sex hormone binding globulin levels are high, low free levels of hormone will be available, and thus low hormone symptoms may exist. Causes of elevated sex hormone binding globulin, in terms of the more common causes today, is actually estradiol, or E2. Higher levels of estrogen increase sex hormone binding globulin levels and therefore decrease free levels. So getting back to the males, if a male has perhaps normal testosterone but high estrogen, there's a good chance that he will have low free testosterone levels, which is really a double-edged sword, because not only does he have high estradiol, but he also has low free testosterone and would most certainly experience low testosterone symptoms because of a combination of those two factors. Because of the high estradiol is likely leading to high sex hormone binding globulin levels and therefore low free testosterone. One of the things that we found to be most effective in this particular situation is to actually improve hepatic or liver detoxification pathways, specifically phase 2 detoxification or conjugation pathways, to help clear out some of that extra estradiol, which less estradiol means less sex hormone binding globulin, which means more free testosterone, and is a pretty good and quick way to try to increase the male's free testosterone and lower those already low testosterone symptoms. And similarly, if estrogen increases sex hormone binding globulin levels, testosterone will decrease sex hormone binding globulin levels. Now, while that sounds good initially, if one has low sex hormone binding globulin levels, they will tend to have excess free steroid hormones. And the problem with that, again, while that sounds good, because this is the usable form by the cells, is excess of any hormone will generally cause a downregulation of the receptors for that given hormone. The body is smarter than that, and with too much hormone, it doesn't need that many receptors, so we'll start to downregulate some of those receptors, potentially causing low hormone symptoms despite having an abundance of a given hormone, and it's maybe because there's low sex hormone binding globulin in the first place. Low sex hormone binding globulin is also very common in women with PCOS. If they have high testosterone, they will generally lower the sex hormone binding globulin levels, making more free testosterone available and thus more of the PCOS symptoms. It turns out that things like dietary fiber can actually help increase sex hormone binding globulin levels and therefore decrease the amount of free testosterone if it's too high. So I hope you found this overview video on some of the hormone markers found on the WellnessFX panels helpful, and I will see you in another video.